Hello, I'm Anil Khanda from GM Modi Science Foundation and with the Galien Foundation as well as. We have just organized this forum and we are pleased to welcome all of you here. And the committee was chaired by Dr. Manju Sharma. She is the Padam Bhushan and the ex-secretary of Department of Biotechnology. She could not come because of her ill health. I'm just reading out her message to this form. Dr. Manju Sharma has pleased to say like this: with great pleasure, I welcome all the awardees, jury members, and other guests. Any function or any event which recognizes science, scientific, and technologists as also academicians, I consider as a very important moment for me. I firmly believe that scientific and technological interventions in all the sphere of activities are the most important pillar for the development of the society and the progress of a nation. Looking at the requirement of human beings and their survival, the essential requirements are food, fodder, medicine, shelter, and a clean environment. Scientific research covering all these aspects is very critical backbone of our development activities. Educate children and enthuse them to take science as a career will certainly help our nation to leapfrog and find a place in the community of most advanced nations. All of us wish that our efforts should be such that we fulfill our desire and attain our goal to maximum satisfaction. Needless to mention that the science and technology in the most advanced nation of the world has played a critical role and has made it possible to acquire their present status. When we look at what is happening in the world today, it is the amazing, unbelievable we have reached and surface of moon and many more remarkable developments concerning the space and the prevailing atmosphere conditions. At the same time, let us look at the living standards of the people in the advanced nation in terms of food, medicines, shelter, and a clean environment. None of us would deny that it is science, research, and technology development which has made it possible to be what they are today. Of course, it is satisfying to note that we in our country are also trying our best to integrate science in our socio-economic progress. Scientists not only do science but also look at administrative matters to facilitate the progress of science and its integration in development of activities. Once again, I warmly welcome all the renowned guests and the experts who have helped us in selection of the awardees. We are grateful to all of them for their kind cooperation and presence this morning. To the awardees, once again, my sincere, affectionate welcome. May God bless of you. Okay, thank you. May I invite Mrs. Sanskrit Thakur to come and take a seat over here, along with the Aishwarya, Ravi, and Niveditha, Viswanathan. Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. As we wait for our panelists to join, I'll do a quick introduction. My name is Sanskriti Thakur. I'm the chairwoman of Tower Capital, as well as a chief strategy officer member of the World Economic Forum. I come here representing both companies, entities, and charitable organizations that work with the Galien Foundation around the world to support the development of critical sciences for the benefit of humanity. I'm the chair of this discussion, and the discussion topic is around generational health. Many of you may not know what generational health means. We define generational health as those health effects passed on, not just the first or second, but to the fourth and more generations. This category of science and this category of innovation is one that will not be forgotten in a decade, but that which we do today will impact us 50 and 60 years in the future, shaping our evolutionary curve. I thank the Galien Foundation for the opportunity to bring this platform to this stage. I also thank the many people who will be watching this broadcast as they seek to educate and share their communities as well as their colleagues on these new developments. Generational health is most important for a country like India. India has one of the largest populations in the world. In addition, it has the opportunity to become one of the most productive and technologically advanced innovators of the world. Science will be a big part of that. But so will India's most untapped resource, which is its women. Women remain to be 51% and growing of our population globally. And the next 1,000 years will be very different than the last 1,000 years. We will have challenges of climate change. Our communities are already seeing the crisis that befalls them. And men and women together must determine how we solve these problems. And in a world where we're armored with a different culture, empowered youth, an aging population, and great technology and science, no country can succeed without embracing all of its members. And so with me today, I have two very important women that we have brought to this stage to share with you their efforts to lead in this country and their efforts to innovate in science. I'm going to ask them to first introduce themselves and tell us about what brings you here and what you do around this topic, and then we'll begin the discussion.
Hello everyone, my name is Aishwarya Ravi. I am a pharmaceutical research scientist for 4 years now, and I'm currently working with Pfizer in their global drug product design team. So my work primarily involves utilization of predictive sciences and enabling model-informed drug decision strategies to accelerate drug development process and to have early access of innovative medications to patients. As a female scientist, I sit at the cusp of tech and biology, and I'm really delighted to be part of this wonderful panelist and looking forward for a remarkable conversation today. And in that note, early happy International Women's Day. Let's begin the note with that. So thank you.
Thanks, Aishwarya. Morning, everybody. I am Niveditha Viswanathan. I lead the healthcare life science practice for Egon Zehnder in India and APAC. I also lead our diversity and DEI practice for the firm. For those of you who may not be familiar, Egon Zehnder does executive search around the world. We do a lot of board and governance related work and leadership coaching, development, and advisory services. And I am part of the healthcare life science practice leadership globally. My interest and inclination towards is twofold. One is, as a member of the firm's leadership, I work closely every day with companies in India and globally to make sure that the right people in the right leadership positions are solving the right problems. And in that, to also include women who are solving the right problems, and B, the right kind of leaders are also solving the right kind of problems that pertain and anchor around women's issues. So both sides. But beyond that, I have also a personal passion towards women's healthcare, and I've done that in the past when I used to lead a health tech startup, also anchored and centered around women's healthcare. So I'm happy to be here and see where the conversation takes us.
Excellent. Hello, excellent. Okay, so again, Sanskriti Thakur, chairwoman of Tower Capital. I've spent 25 years in life sciences, half of that in industry, leading portfolios, global portfolios in medicine, and the other half in strategy consulting. We also started a digital health company that has grown to about $2 billion to support rural and access to care where people do not get care. And these experiences together give us the motivation to have these conversations. And generational health, which is the title of this panel, is not possible without women's health, is a contextual but important conversation that has both scientific but also cultural implications. As a culture, we have to think about what that means, how we protect our species, how we evolve together, so that we can overcome the significant challenges ahead of us. In that context, we have to think about three things. We have to think about us as human beings, our culture, our capacity to change, to adopt, to lead. We also have to consider our biology. So if we, as communities, are custodians of our future, and if women play a role as mothers, custodians of change, and the biological shaping of our next and many future generations, then we have to reflect on this first from their role today. So perhaps we can start with Niveditha. Did I say your name correctly?
You can.
Excellent,
Yeah.
excellent. And Sanskriti is hard to say too sometimes. So in your experience shaping women, shaping their leadership roles, you must see how they interact with the world. And the question is, how does female leadership, by design, reshape scientific innovation?
Thanks, Sanskriti. I'll start by making a couple of statements which I think, for the most part, are not debatable, right? One, like you said, human species cannot move forward without women in it. The second piece is women play a very significant and important role in our communities, in our societies, and in the family construct. But we also need women running countries and companies. And the third is, I think it's great to have this conversation today, but some version of this conversation needs to happen every day, everywhere, right? And I think for the most part, all of these will stand true as factual statements. The reality is, I don't think it is the way the world functions today, right? And because we're speaking about generational health, where we are is an outcome of where we have been for the last hundreds of thousands of years. And development has happened, economies have grown, globalization has happened. But alongside all of those things, while we are today talking about equality and equity for women at the highest level, the change really needs to start at a much earlier bottom of the pyramid approach. And that's not easy at all in a country like India, because there are 100 Indias within India. So where do you start and how do you do this? But the fact of the matter remains that there hasn't been a single historic event or innovation that hasn't had a female contribution in some capacity or the other. Everywhere from the nuclear bomb to launching a rocket to the moon, there has been women's contribution everywhere. The point is, it's not as spotlighted and celebrated, or sometimes gets masked in everything else that we do. So I think we are talking about it. I will be humble and say I'm not sure we're doing everything that we can, even in each of our capacities, to put women where they need to be by design, as you pointed out in your question. And I think there is no way that any of this progress can continue in a meaningful manner without including half of the world's population, with thoughtfulness, with deliberation, and with design that sets women up for success and what you can do. I'm not going to belabor the point on women bringing diverse thoughts and adding value and having a point of view that's more inclusive, etc. I think those are all done to death, and everybody here in the room knows about it. But the point that I would like each of us to really maybe think about for 10 seconds while we're in the room is, what have you as an individual done in your capacity to empower one or a few women around you in your professional and personal corners, right? My sense is many of our answers would be slightly disappointing, and that's my urge and invitation to you, which is this has to happen by design and with proactive thought, and we all agree on it. My invitation and urge to you is, what have you done and what can you do about it? And I'm going to pause with that reflective thought for the room.
Thank you. We always need a reminder, all of us, of our role that we play in the shaping of our society. Science, however, can be very rigid. So we as scientists have hypotheses and we look for outcomes and we measure them. So the data does not then lie that we have very little good data on women, especially in rural communities and rural areas, and that the access to care for those women is less than 1/3 globally than the average man. Additionally, data on how we will evolve as a species and our children is equally lacking. So it's important that we utilize our newest technologies to inform this so that we have the most robust approach to developing and shaping innovations for our future. And so, Aishwarya, as a scientist looking at the cutting edge of these technologies, can you share with us, what do you believe is going to shift this paradigm?
Sure. Thanks for the question, Sans. I think it's a very important one, and I'd like to start answering this question with a small story. In 2012, Ida Tin, a Danish entrepreneur, designed a software called Clue. Clue is designed to its users, being women, to track their menstrual cycles and also covariates of menstrual cycles such as mood swings, eating patterns, sleeping habits, etc. Clue, that time, not only empowered women to get to understand their bodies better, but also has a lot of data which women manually enter to, kind of take model-informed decisions. It has a lot of data that is going to drive innovation and science. Ida Tin recognized that there is a huge gap between the soaring technological advancements and the already known data of women's physiology. She bridged the gap beautifully by developing an app called Clue. Clue today, including me, I'm a downloader of Clue, has about 11 million followers and subscribers. Women have been using them to empower to getting to understand their bodies better. And then she coined the word called femtech, which is female plus technology put together as femtech. She coined this word to legitimize and to attract investment opportunities and funding opportunities to propel the science forward for women's healthcare. Femtech today is a soaring market, and especially in India, it's valued at $48.5 billion in 2025, consisting of female entrepreneurs, female software developers, female scientists like me, developing applications to do period tracking, pregnancy tracking, and many other medical devices that could track mental illnesses in women and some of the physiological conditions that affect women disproportionately, like osteoporosis, cardiovascular diseases, dysmenorrhea, etc. So I think this is the way femtech is trying to help women try and understand their bodies better, empower them, This is going to lead to more innovation in science, and the applications are just going to empower women more and more, is what I feel.
Can I just add to that,
Please,
what you're saying, Aishwarya? So it's really interesting because in my work, I get to talk to leaders, founders, board members that are working on both the here and now, solving problems for today, and people who are working on moonshots that sometimes seem like outlandish, right? And I came across two conversations in the last few weeks that I'd love to share here. One is a group of people that are really niche focused in femtech, their entire area of focus being how women's physiology and reproductive organs have actually changed today versus 30, 40 years ago. And they have studied immense cohorts of women across various markets and age groups and demographics to arrive at the point that our reproductive organs, our uteruses, have actually physically shifted in our body. They're not in the same space as they used to be 30, 35 years ago. And among these, women who spend a lot of time in environments like oil rigs or aircrafts, so female pilots and crew members, people who are in artificially pressurized and temperature conditions are the most affected, right? Now, on the one hand, I was... Sorry?
I said I better watch out.
You have a 15-hour flight. But the fascinating thing that stuck with me when I heard this is it's impressive the kind of focus, niche, data, research, development that's going in towards women's healthcare today, right, on the one hand. On the other hand, I spoke to somebody who used to lead the healthcare initiative for the Gates Foundation in India and APAC, and he was talking about how he is struggling to convince a few different state governments on fundamentally shifting access to primary care and women's health care. And he's sort of somebody who's among the most established people in the country, was instrumental in sort of leveraging the Anganwadi system to something much beyond just what their core JD was initially. So he's probably among the people that will have the most access for anything that he wanted to establish in a country like us. And he spent a couple of hours talking about the challenges of just getting state governments to see what he wants to do and the merit of it. The point I want to make both of these statements is they're both true, they're both happening in India, they're both happening with the right intent, passion, commitment, but they're also happening with a lot of, I would say, constraints, obstructions, and it not being as seamless as it could be. And that is something perhaps that we need to particularly appreciate in a country like ours, because where we are today is, again, an output of what women's generational health has been over many, many decades, right? And we cannot make generational progress when it comes to women's healthcare if we do not tackle both ends of the spectrum with equal commitment.
Well, I think one of the root causes of this is actually women's health is not separate from healthcare.
Yes, yes.
Women's health is part of healthcare. It's not a separate initiative.
Yeah.
It's not alone. We all have our children with our families together, where the environments that we live in affect our physiology. Those epigenetic changes that happen inside of our cells and our organs as a result of large amounts of carbon exposure or impurities and toxins in air and water happen to all of us. It so happens that women's physiology allows them to be the champions and custodians of the future, but it's not separate.
Yeah.
And we all benefit from the health of each other in our communities. And so the mindset has to shift from saying, oh, we have to put this much here, into saying that all of it has to be designed purposefully for the community to access, for the wealth and the health of that community. A very good example of this, actually, the example will support your point, is during COVID. 90% of our funding resources went to a vaccine, but where did they come from? Most of those funds were pulled from primary care services, maternal health services, screenings for children on basic diseases. So we went forward by vaccinating a global population for COVID-19, but we went 20 years backwards in managing chronic diseases and managing basic children's health and offering life-saving services to pregnant women. Why did the money come from there? Was it by design? Or have we prioritized our investments a little bit differently? And do we need to rethink that? So I was lucky enough to launch with McKinsey, World Economic Forum, and other leaders in Davos, research on the women's health gap. So it's not a healthcare problem, it's an actual GDP problem.
Mm-hmm.
When we don't have healthy people, and in this case our unlocked workforce is the woman, if we don't have healthy women, we don't have a productive economy.
Mm-hmm.
We cannot compete. We cannot defend ourselves. I'll use the United States here as a little bit of a scapegoat. In the United States, 76% of the able population to defend the country would be considered disqualified from the military because of chronic disease burden. 50% of those being genetic, genomic, or environmental, therefore generational. I would guess if we did the same study in India, I wonder what the outcome would be. So, as we consider this, I'd like to open the floor again to how technology may help us to bridge a gap in care. And what are the works that you are doing today to accelerate these changes and these challenges that we're discussing?
Sure. I think I could take this in a context of are women imperative to technological advances and progress, and how could we leverage technology to bridge the gap? I think indeed women are imperative to technological progress and adoption, and their early participation would bring in more software tools. You know, I'm speaking from the technology and science part of sides, from developing medical devices, from developing software tools, to consider women physiology. And if women is going to be part of developing the software, she would consider the variability in women and try to incorporate that in software. So women benefits out of the software to use that and track, you know, her body. Being this, I would say another important thing that we should keep in mind is telemedicine. Telemedicine is a huge thing today, and as you said correctly, Sans, during the time of COVID is when telemedicine became viral, and telemedicine is going to early detect diseases, and it's going to provide access of information on preventative health, and it's going to provide health literacy. When we consider this from a rural perspective, there was a scientist doctor in Pakistan, and her name is Dr. Syed, I believe. She brought this app called Sehat Kahani, which, you know, she was in the point of COVID and she was not able to treat women or treat patients. So she developed this app which entirely works on telemedicine. She can be in any part of the world, and rural women were educated about this app. Even though they did not have a phone or they did not possess a tablet, a nurse would intervene into their houses, bring them to a, you know, e-clinic, and the doctor would be waiting on a video call, and then there would be diagnosis and intervention. So I think telemedicine is a huge part of femtech today, and this is technology, where rural women could incorporate telemedicine in their daily parts of, not even daily parts of life, when they're pregnant, they need not go to a doctor, physically, but they can use telemedicine to kind of gain information on pregnancy. But in rural side, there is another app called Kilkari and M-Mitra, which is a government-based app, and it kind of gives powerful bites, like a 30-second bite through IVR, or through messaging, which says, take care of your pregnancy, you're in this term of the pregnancy, how do you have to take care of your body, what do you have to eat, what are the supplements that you have to take. I think this is utilized by most rural women today, and I think that's how technology is definitely changing the world of women's health.
Well, we just really allowed technology to bridge even the current system of care in that case, assuming it continues to be funded, and assuming that there's the user, as you mentioned, the user has to be part of the development. So I mentioned this report, the research, this $1 trillion gap, right, that we have to fill in the next many years, and women can fill it if they're healthy. Because as we know, we're expecting flat global growth for the next 30 years, which is a challenge. And we cannot be therefore competitive without them. But then it comes back to our positions as leaders and as our positions as those who can shape these technologies if they can help us to survive, to exist, to work together as communities, to raise healthier families and be more productive. But this word equitable, this word everyone wants to use. People use lots of words, right? And I question whether they actually know what they mean. I question whether they actually care about what they mean. So as an expert on leaders, will you help us first to understand what it should mean, and then what is equitable representation, and what might that mean for India?
Thank you. So let me start by saying, as someone who's part of our DEI leadership, I am not a big fan of diversity. I'm not a big fan of inclusion. I'm not a big fan of equality, equity, because I think we are in 2024. It's about time we move to a platform where we're all just people, right? Let's just consider everybody as human beings, people, to start with. I think human species has come to a stage of evolution where we can start there, right? But having said that, the realities of what has got us here do not escape me, right? We have done what we have done, we've progressed as we have, and we've left some communities and demographics behind, and we have to make up for it, right? The point that I would like to see change or shift a little bit in the conversation is, like you were also saying earlier, Sanskriti, is women as a subgroup is not separate from anything, right? It's just characteristic of the human species that have a few variables that are different than others. That's it. That really is it. So when you talk about how do we create or how do we prepare for equality and equity, in a country like India, today India is among the fastest growing economies in the world. We're in the top 5. We are the largest and fastest growing economy in Asia, but we have the lowest percentage of women's workforce representation in the country. In a country that's got population only second to China. Now, when you put these in perspective, there are 2 ways to look about it. One is to say, look, let's make up for wherever the gaps were in the past, and we'll focus on those areas. The other is to say, this is what the world needs, this is what the country needs, this is what we got to do for the next 10, 15, 20 years. So let's equip everybody together without delineating them as men, women, rural, urban. I mean, these realities exist. Please don't mistake my point to say that they don't. They very much exist, and they're in our face and experience every day. But I feel like somewhere when we focus on women-related topics as a separate agenda, we lose the power of the collective agenda, right? So our push and my personal urge throughout our approach and conversation has always been, let's not treat women's agenda as a separate agenda, it just is a collective agenda. However, you can't not compensate for making sure that women have a level playing field. If they have a level playing field, the collective agenda is very strong. But if they're left behind because they have been left behind, we need to compensate for it, right? And my urge, Sanskriti, in the work that we do is to have the conversation at the leadership level, but it's got to start 5 levels before that. There was this lovely article in either the New Yorker or the New York Times, I think it was the New York Times in 2015, with the headline that said, there are you may be familiar with this, there are fewer women CEOs in the world than CEOs named John. Okay, it was a pretty compelling headline, and I always remember it. So you can't have women leaders, or you can't have women in positions of power just dropping from the clouds. They can't just laterally come in. You can only achieve that if it starts 5 steps earlier, 10 steps earlier, right? So our push or approach and my effort when it comes to women taking charge and being in spots of leadership and therefore enabling this collective participation in the economy is to make sure that A, you do have enough women in positions of power so that this becomes a central theme and effort, but also to make sure everybody, men, women, brothers, sisters, everybody start that effort 10 steps before.
Change starts inside communities. And this brings us to sort of the third part of the chapter of generations. We are in a global climate crisis. We have seen countries change, their borders change, their ability to access water, their watering resources, all of it shifting very quickly. Even for those who say they don't believe, the science tells us it's so. And when we look at these countries and we look at the actions happening inside those countries to manage that change, we are seeing that inside of those communities, women and men together are making those differences. They're treating the waters. They're farming the lands. And in fact, when you measure the number of people by just number who are actively managing climate change, the largest majority are women inside communities. So then we have to ask ourselves, if we cannot keep them healthy, because also they're the first ones to lose their healthcare rights, if we cannot keep them healthy, who is going to manage the immediate concerns? And those environmental toxicities are creating epigenetic changes inside the bodies of women and men, which are passed on transgenerationally down to the 4th generation. So as we consider our future, it's not just women's health, it's generational health. It is the technologies and data required to make those important decisions. And it's our role as custodians of that change. So thank you. I think I'm being waved for a moment. Yeah?
Surbhi is here. If you can come here. She's there. If you can come.
Sure, okay. Well,
Surbhi Modi.
Okay, wonderful. We have a panelist who is able to join us. So lucky us. Her name is Surbhi Modi. She is an innovator. So I'd like to invite her to the stage. There she is. Hello. Please join us. And we've covered a number of topics, and we're going to be very impromptu. So please, for our audience, since you've just joined us, please introduce yourself, and then also please tell us about the innovation that you have both invested in and created and founded, as I understand it. And what is the change you expect to see in the communities for generational health and for women?
Thank you, Sanskriti, and thank you, audience, for... Am I audible? I'm just going to move in a little bit. I know it's lovely to be here, and I mean, I got the last bit of your conversation, which sounds amazing in terms of the importance of women in health and women in the importance of women in the world. And the viewpoint that I'm looking at, and which is something which is very prevalent in India, is infertility. 25% of the world's infertile couples are in India. And this seems like a bit of an irony when you think of the fact that 65% of our population is under 35. So you would imagine that people who are young would be fertile. I mean, we're the largest population, most populous country in the world. So just the socio-demographic of India is astounding, because 25% of the world's population in the infertile community is in India. So the innovation that we have incubated into India is basically called Modi Mim, which is an AI ML deep tech company which makes IVFs more accurate. So it typically like a couple that wants to get pregnant would have to go for maybe about 2.7 to 3 cycles to get pregnant. When you think about this, just to give you a sense of the numbers, typically in India it costs $2,000 to $3,000 to go in for an IVF, which, even though it's much cheaper than the US, it's about a sixth of what it costs in the US, it is way ahead of what the average Indian can afford. Typically, people living in urban centers are like making 40,000 rupees in India a month. So they're not able to afford it, and if they had to wait 3 cycles to get pregnant, and if you add to this the fact that, I mean, that's just the financial angle of it, but just the duress that the woman goes through. And within our culture, the burden to have a child really rests with the women, which is very strange, because actually infertility is equally, in equal parts, both the female and male responsibility, and it's been attributed to both men and women. So what we're doing in our part is to make IVFs which are more effective, so you need to do less cycles, so it becomes more cost efficient for a couple to go in for it. There's less pressure on the family. Also, from the clinician's point of view, it reduces human error. It's 3 times faster when you do an ultrasound. So essentially, if I give you a little bit of a background, this works at the level of the diagnostic ultrasound level, where it's being integrated with the ultrasound machine, and it makes the ultrasound 3 times faster. The image is 3 times faster and 3 times more accurate. So,
well, it's wonderful that you're sharing this with us, because it both describes the advances in technology, but it also actually touches on 2 very important points. Will it be equitable for the larger population in India, is a question. But also the second point is infertility is on the rise because of environmental health concerns. And infertility has been studied in both men and women, and both men and women are affected, men more so than women in many cases, affected by infertility because of our current health environment. So, well, it's wonderful that you're sharing this with us, because it both describes the advances in technology, but it also touches on 2 very important points. Will it be equitable for the larger population in India, is a question. But also the second point is infertility is on the rise because of environmental health concerns. And 2 points that your innovation can support. Culturally, it would be interesting also how we would be able to give access. I'd like, if you wouldn't mind, to jump in, Niveditha, because I'm curious, when this innovation goes to market, who's going to get it, and how is that then going to be an equitable representation for women in India?
So, thank you, and it's lovely to hear about what you're doing, Surbhi. Like I was saying, women's health today and over the generations, and will remain to be so, has implications within the family unit, within the community, within society, and at the GDP unit, right? And fundamental to how women's progression in the participation of the economy differs from men is around the reproductive process. That is really how, at the very macro level, if you oversimplify, that's actually the core of why there is a divergence between men and women's participation in the economy at the higher level. We haven't always made it easy for women to continue doing what they're doing while also fulfilling this need to carry the human species forward. But on the other side, it also is a problem that is increasingly becoming complex because of all the factors we've spent some time discussing, right? I think opportunities and platforms like what Surbhi is working with here helps, on the one hand, women take a little bit more control maybe and a little bit more choice in the overall process and decision making, and B, having an avenue to do it and making it perhaps more affordable than limiting it to a very small segment of the population. Having said that, I think there is still a larger systemic issue to be dealt with in how men participate in this process that concerns women more exclusively than men, how organizations support it as women take these decisions and go through their journeys and careers, and how policies and regulatory outfits are able to make it more accessible and enable it to whoever is working in any of these adjacent areas, so that we can continue to enable women and get them to do what they want as they journey through life and career and, you know, the larger ecosystem.
So Surbhi, before we close the panel, I think let's ask you one more question. We've discussed generational health. We've agreed that there is no separation of people, that we have to understand the role that we play in our society as leaders. We have to leverage what technology can offer us to fill data gaps. But we also have to work through misunderstanding. And so my question for you, because infertility because of environmental challenges and health challenges is a global concern. It's not just a US concern or an India concern, it's a global concern. It will happen. And it's a function of our evolution of species. Some species evolve to become infertile. Is that our outcome? I don't know. But the question I will have for you is, as you consider your strategic execution, how will you work with the government and industry to cover the costs of what will inevitably be more expensive for the general population?
Thank you. I think, Sanskriti, that's a very, very good question. So in terms of the execution, and this is something that we've actually been working very tirelessly for the last 1.5 years almost, because, even while we talk about how the Assisted Reproductive Act just came into being in 2021 in India. So infertility is growing by 15% in India. So the government is taking note. I just want to make one point, and it gives perspective to what is happening in India. In its current form, just recently, what has happened is that the birth rate, India has fallen below its birth rate. The replacement rate, the replacement rate has fallen before. So in 78 years, we will lose 30% of our population, which of course you can see as a, as a positive or a negative. But what will happen is, and I'm coming to the point that you're asking, what will happen is that like the Eastern countries, like Japan, etc., the young population will be less, and there'll be an aging population. So the government is actually taking cognizance of this. And despite all of this, IVF at the moment is only accessible to 1% of the people. So when we spoke about integration within the Indian context, we have met several clinics, and there is the issue because of the prenatal sex determination. The ultrasound machine in itself is almost like Fort Knox, so you can't move it. So and this is something that we've been toying with. On the one hand, you have an expensive solution for a very, very pressing problem. So then, and the question arises, the way IVF is sold is that it's sold as a package in India. So like $1,500, $2,000. So who's going to bear that extra cost? And since integration becomes a problem, so internally the team has come up with the idea to actually integrate at the hardware level. So basically speak to the Philips, Canons, GEs of the world and integrate it as a preset feature, because the technology is actually better than what GE has. So so for them, then at least the new machines get immediately integrated, and then the question arises about the existing machines. So then then it's a question of a software play, and that's essentially the integration and execution strategy that we're looking at.
Well, nothing wrong with doing what's worked before.
Yeah.
Absolutely nothing wrong with that.
Yeah.
So look, first I want to thank our audience and those watching, as well as all of the partners here, for bringing generational health to the forefront of this discussion. Thank you so much. I'm going to ask our panelists to say one call to action there. Keep it short. What is the one thing you want people in the world to do to support your cause, to support generational health, to ensure that we're innovating differently, considering we're a different world and a different community? Let's start with Aishwarya.
Sure. To be a representative of science and technology, I'd ask myself, am I answering these 4 Ps in developing technology and science? Is the technology going to be personalized for women? Is it going to be predictive enough, because we have so much of data through artificial adaptive intelligence? Is it going to be participatory? Are users having a tough time with the app, or is it more participatory? And is it preventative? So as a tech, as a scientist, if I'm going to keep this in mind, then I'm going to be developing an app that could be more accessible, affordable, and would create awareness. So the 4 Ps and the 3 As. That's from me.
Thank you.
My call to action for all of you and us is, every day do what you would do for your daughter at work and at home.
Thank you. Yeah. I think I kind of resonate with what Niveditha said. I think if we are to adopt technology, we need to be empathetic, and ultimately we need to think about the lives of the people. How can we make it better? And I think if we can break it down in a more practical way and think about how, not just on a, because sometimes your right brain and your left brain, you want to kind of merge that. And I think if we can empathetically adopt technologies, I think that'll be key in the sector.
Thank you. My last words will be, please think generationally, because it's coming tomorrow. And what we do today really does have 50 to 60 years of impact for our communities and our health. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Sanskriti Thakur, who is also the chairman, Generational Health Pioneer, World Economic Forum, Strategic Council. And we are sure that we will certainly benefit with your all discussions which you had with the panels.